Hey
I,
everybody.
I'm start over there, Sean.
This is what us pros call in media res. Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson,
I'm Carson Grubaugh. Welcome to the Living the Line.
and today we're going to be talking about a book by someone who we've talked to before, J.H. Williams III, but talking with one of my favorite cartoonists, Mr. Miel Vandepitte. How are you doing, Miel?
Hi, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Miel recently had Centralia come out in English, and I believe the French edition came out just a little bit before the English one. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah.
And you had a book opening for the English one in Flanders. How did that go?
Yeah, there is well, I was going to say a small shop. It's actually quite big. We have one American comic book uh, shop in Ghent, and they were nice enough to host a little book launch events. And yeah, a few people came over and bought the book. Most of them already have it in Dutch, of course, so the attendance wasn't that high, but it was still nice to have a little event around it. It was the first time I saw the book, so that was yeah really cool to finally see it in person, the
Is it
translation.
right? Is it weird to have a multiple editions of something that you've worked on like that? I mean, side by side, or are you tempted to microscopically analyze the paper, or rub them, or I don't know.
Well, I absolutely rubbed the papers, but yeah, but I always pay a lot of attention to the kind of paper that books are printed on. And you made a good choice on when it comes to that. I like the paper a lot. Um, I like the cover as well. Paper or the
Mhm.
material that was used for the cover. I think the Dutch version it stains really easily, and I think the
Mhm.
one you went with is a bit more smooth texture-wise, and it's not going to stain as easily, which is
Mm.
very useful. So I liked the way it came out. I liked it
You,
a lot.
you would be happy. The printer persuaded me to go with that. They're like, no, no, no.
Really?
Well, yeah, they're like, because it's in their best interest to ship something that doesn't get banged all to hell by the time it arrives. But
Mhm.
yeah, unvarnished like the Dutch edition is a you have to persuade the printer to do something like that because they'll
Yeah.
they'll be like, oh, the ink's gonna fall off their hands.
Mhm.
But
Oh.
specialized paper and everything. But anyway, if you guys have not checked out Miel's work yet, he's working on a follow-up graphic novel now. It's not related, but it's going to be out in Dutch hopefully next year. And God willing, and the creeks don't rise, and he's still interested in working with us. Maybe it'll be in English. English a couple months after that if we work it out. But he's a fantastic cartoonist and well worth following his progress. You can follow him on Instagram at Happy Meal 4. But
Yeah.
today, today you brought a particular book to talk about. I know
Right.
Carson was salivating when he saw this on your list. Will you tell us about what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, we're going to talk about one of J.H. Williams III's Batwoman books, the first volume that came out as part of the New 52, I believe. It's from 2015. Um, this is the book. I believe Carson has a copy that he will show in a few moments. And yeah, it's very interesting. I'm a big fan of this artist. And he was nice enough to write something about my book, which makes him even more awesome in my book. Uh, so yeah, that's the reason that this came to be.
Yeah, and Carson, you've been following him since Promethea. Is that right?
Yeah, that's where I first saw J.H. Williams stuff, and if you've read that, over the course of it, he really blossoms into that multi-style kind of approach and multimedia approach that he uses, and then retroactively have gone back and seen his older work, and then of course followed everything since. So this is something that I was, yeah, really excited to talk about, and I have the Omnibus, which collects pretty much anything that he was involved with on Batwoman. And so I was like, oh yeah, I've got that. Cool. Like it's a great excuse to go back and reread that. And always happy to relook at his work. It is interesting to go back, seeing where he's gone from here and being like, holy crap, like he's gotten even better, right? I remember when this came out, you think, oh my God, like this is as good as it gets. And then seeing where he's at on Echo Lands or what he did on Sandman, that he's continued to improve from already such a good spot. It's pretty mind-boggling.
Well, yeah, we're gonna take a look at. So Carson and I took a look at the first series of Echolands. I know he's working on the second series of Echolands now. but the first series, we were both totally blown away by, and I have to say, like, I see all of the echoes. See what I did there?
Yeah.
Of that project in this. I mean, and of course, his collaborators are the same as well. He's working with Hayden Blackman as the scripter, or one of the writers, and the colorist. And we'll talk about why I just put air quotes on that in my voice there. But the colorist is also isn't Todd Klein also the letterer on Echo Lens? Maybe
Yeah, letterer, and then you're working with
Dave Stewart is the colorist.
Dave Stewart. Yeah, I think that's like that's the go-to team, because they definitely, Todd Klein was on Promethea. I don't know about Dave Stewart, but when we start taking a look at the art, you'll see why you need you need a team like that to be as versatile as J.H. Williams is. You got to be able to keep up kind of in every aspect. So
Right. And so maybe we should just go ahead and take a look.
okay, so you guys have you were just reading the volume 1 of the New 52 stuff, and that's something I want to ask about, because I got the sense, Miel, when I asked which one you were reading, you were like, what do you mean which one? And didn't know that there was previous material with Greg Rucka. So one of the things I'm interested to hear is how much the story made sense without like all of this here preceding it in your reading. But that's the volume we're reading, is volume 1 of I think the Greg Rucka stuff was in Detective Comics, and then when they started the New 52, then J.H. Williams took over the writing with his friend, and that's what we're here then at volume 1 of that run, which is I think what you guys read, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I assumed this was a fresh start because it's the New 52. It's a big reboot. It just didn't come up for me that there was maybe a backstory or something that I was supposed to have read. All the things that I didn't really get the first time, I thought, oh, I must have missed that. So
Okay.
yeah, I thought it was just me, but it makes sense that there's a whole backstory because they do mention the sister of the main character of Batwoman who died and all of that. There was a little in the version that I have. There was a little text in the beginning, I believe, mentioning this, but it's really short. So yeah, there was. You're right. There was a lot of backstory that I missed out on.
But you were still able to enjoy it.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think as far as superhero comics go, I mean, this did a pretty good job of packing things in. They kind of pull a Chris Claremont in the first chapter, the one that was published as issue 0, and give you a very, very text dense recap of a lot of the things that you're going to need to know in the next 100 pages or whatever.
Yeah. And it also made sense. Of course, she has a tragic backstory, and of course, her sister died and became a villain. That's what happens in superhero comics, so it made sense to me.
So Carson, you were saying that Greg Rucka was the writer on the previous series that J.H. Williams was also the artist on, and I have read some of those also because of the prompting here. I'd never seen any of these before, but what is the background of this character? How long was it around? How did they give her Bob Kane's last name? I'm sorry, I said that name without spitting on the ground. What's wrong with me? I'm gonna lose my card. How long has this character been around? And were you aware of this other than as related to J.H. Williams?
The Kate Kane character?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure. I mean, I don't follow characters, I just jumped on
Right.
because J.H. Williams was drawing it. So
Okay.
as far as I know, this version of Batwoman starts with them. I'm not
Okay.
sure. But the other character that was a big part of that run is this kind of Alice in Wonderland figure here, which does turn out to be like her dead sister brought back to life. And that's the major villain through that Rucka run. And so that's when that becomes a part of this other one. And I was thinking, if those guys haven't read that, I wonder how much sense that makes when this character shows up in the end of it, and just kind of out of nowhere if you didn't have context for that. But I can't answer how long the Kate Kane character's been around. I think it was an invention for this run here, because you get all the stuff with her dad being ex-military and things like that in this this one written by Greg Rucka, but I'm not sure. I can't say for sure.
And it's you see some of her personal life, such as it is, obviously being awake all night, beating people up is tiring work, but she still has time to have relationships She's a lesbian, which I think is a pretty significant part of character's backstory, and also her, relationships and such, like the policewoman that she befriends and the people that she's attempting to support or be, positive role model, I guess, in the similar way that she looked up to Batman.
Yeah, and that's all explained, I think, really well. Like Miel, you're pointing out that she has like a similar kind of background to Batman. And I really liked how they presented that in this Zero issue where they have this dual narrative with J.H. Williams drawing up here, and I think it's Amy Reeder drawing on the bottom. And they're both Batman is speaking in both of them, but they're at different times. And then there's also kind of a duality in the sense that he's like looking at her having gone through a similar tragedy, kind of being a vigilante. He's seen similarities, but also kind of bemoaning the fact that like she can still go out and have fun, and he's never figured out how to do that. I thought that was a funny little moment, but I really like that narrative structure of the kind of two different tiers running against each other.
Yeah, that's something I easily get annoyed by. When you have two stories at the same time, I always get more invested in one of the two. But in this case, it works really well, in my opinion. And yeah, also the fact that it's two different art styles for the two stories, or the two
Threads.
It's the same story, but different moments in the same story. For those two sequences, it worked really well, I believe. So I like that a lot.
I think that's what helps it be not like two stories. It's just kind of, they're both Batman talking. One's like inner monologue in his head as he's watching her fight, and the other one's like his notes from previous as he's trying to figure out who she is. And I think that's why it works, is because it is two narratives, but it's also the same. They're not totally, different narratives. It's him trying to solve the mystery of who she is, trying to figure out her secret identity.
This is a visual technique that he takes to lunatic extremes in issue 4, I believe, of Echo Lens, where you have just completely separate paths on the top and on the bottom, which is very satisfying there. And once again, he draws it as if he's two different human beings, which visually helps things out a lot.
Yeah, and in this one, it's rare that there is a second artist. And I found that really compelling on this page, where they must have collaborated, because this is all J.H. Williams for sure. This looks like his drawing, but then this is obviously the Amy Reeder drawing. So that collaboration is pretty interesting, and you wonder how that worked when you're designing, like he has to be designing the pages somehow, or there's some back and forth in the design before everyone settles into their pencils, because it's not all like, well, you do this page and I do this page. They're often together. So I'm just interested in how that happened, because that would be a difficult thing to collaborate on, but fun.
Yeah, I didn't know that. That's very impressive that it was a collaboration. I didn't notice it actually, because he's that good at imitating people's styles. I just assumed, oh, this is another one of his personas. But no, it's actually a different artist. That's cool.
Well, I mean, basically, as soon as we get out of this issue, you see a ton of that as a narrative technique, and even in the Greg Rucka issues, I mean, he leans into that pretty heavily. The first Greg Rucka issue, I mean, every scene that takes place in the lesbian bar, it basically, like the scenes that are her personal life are drawn in a clean line style. And the all of the superhero stuff is done with that hyper intense, as you're seeing here, style, where Williams will essentially execute a monotone wash painting with select areas of actual painted color, and then his colorist will tint each of those areas, so he has total control over the value relationships for the section, but the colorist is making the spot-to-spot color decisions, which is a really incredible effect. I had no idea that was what was going on when we were first reading Echo Lens, until Carson was hipping me to the technique by flipping through the artist edition versions they put out of that. I actually messed around with that this morning for illustration I was working on, and it's a surprisingly effective technique, as long as you think about those value relationships like the entire time you're doing the value painting. Like, you have to like establish those, or it's a mess. You can't rely just on color contrast, in other words.
Well, and also knowing that if you want a pure red, the natural value of that translated to black and white would be 50% gray. But if you want it to read as pure red, you have to leave it white. So it's not as easy as just a straight value translation either. So a lot of interesting planning. But this is the stylistic flip that you're talking about. And here it is, J.H. Williams doing the work.
Right.
So it's interesting to see that he has this other artist who can kind of do that style, and then he'll bring someone else in to kind of fill in the gaps when he's running out of time, I think, but then he can also do it on his own. And Miel, is that one of the things that really, like, I'm curious, when we asked you like which books would you like to talk about, was it that kind of play, or what were you looking at in this that really drew you to the talking about this one?
Yeah, it's mainly the way the pages are organized for me.
I was gonna say, damn it.
Yeah.
That's the commonality with your stuff, you know?
Yeah, the reason I like that so much is that in Belgian comics, the styles haven't really evolved in the past 5 decades. It's still very Tintin-like. You have the 4 rows of panels, and there's nothing really creative going on. Certainly not in the way that you see it in this book. We don't even do splash pages, really. And then this is so different and so interesting compared to that I was immediately drawn to it when I saw it for the first time. I even had a few pages of his Sandman book on my wall just as inspiration to look at, because it's so different from what I'm used to seeing. So that's the first thing that drew me in, and then just the draftsmanship of everything.
Right, which is stunning. Carson, that panel right there, that this is an incredible narrative use of color, where we get to see what she's seeing by dropping out all of the color in that panel except for that one photo. And so, you know, we don't have to do anything other than that. It's a real brilliant example of the formal tricks that are happening here. But
well,
yeah,
and I saw this, you know, Miel talking about the influence on some of Miel's compositions,
right,
where you'll use like one perspective grid, but you'll show like 5 different scenes and like on the same perspective, and so your brain can see them all as one scene, or you can kind of split them up like, oh my god, this happened, like this is 5 different totally different locations. I can see some of that in here, where he's using the 2-point perspective of the building to create the panels that he fits things into.
Yeah, and you know, I think that that's one of the things that I was drawn to your work and independently drawn to this without even without realizing that there was that commonality, is your narrative flow across and awareness of a spread as a single meta composition. When we talked to J.H. Williams, you know, we kind of picked his brain a little bit, like how about Gene Day? And you know, he was willing to nod his head like, yeah, Gene Day is the inspiration. But where is that coming from you initially? Like you said, you had a Sandman spread tagged up. Is that your first? Was that your first like sort of thought of a double page as a meta composition?
Yeah, I think so. I think that actually it was, yeah.
Very interesting.
I wish I had more. I really only started reading comics in 2015, so right around the time when this came out. Yeah, so it must have been, yeah. I never really thought about it, but I think it was the Sandman book by J.H. Williams.
That you saw him composing like this, where there's like a structure that contains all the panels.
Yeah, exactly.
Very interesting.
But then you've made those compositions, you've kind of mixed the two, like you've gone from, this is obviously him paying some tribute to that clean line thing that you're talking about and the more stable panel grid. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you still use fairly gridded panels, but then what's going on within them will tie it. I don't think that you've done anything that has like the design elements like this, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I think that a lot of people, when they try to do something like this, it becomes a convoluted mess, and it looks nice, but the story takes a backseat to the art, and I don't want that to happen. And I didn't want that to happen in my book, so I tried not to be too ambitious with it. But maybe in the future, I really like to look at this stuff, so maybe I'll try to do something similar one day.
But it's interesting because you hit that midpoint where there is a more reasonable flow, but there's also that sense of continuity. I think that's one of the things, like when I went and did the little overview video of Centralia, I try not to show all of them, but I wanted to show a couple of them because I thought that was one of the really compelling things about your work, is that it maintains the kind of clarity from this, but there's a unity to the page that I'm not used to seeing in this kind of work. I'm used to seeing it in this. So I think you actually, by pulling back a little bit, found the right kind of medium, because I think that's maybe my only knock on J.H. Williams is sometimes when you have a page like this, you want to maybe go like this or like this. And it can vary with him too, so you can't get predictable. Like sometimes his stuff will read circularly, and that stuff's always fun and tricky, but I do think sometimes it causes a little bit of hesitation for me in like, did I read things in the right order?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I didn't have any problems with readability in this volume, but in the second volume, when other people take over and they try to do their best J.H. Williams impressions, then it became a bit confusing, because I think they were not as used to this kind of storytelling as he is. And yeah, those volumes or issues were a bit more confusing for me, but I didn't have any problems reading this book.
No, yeah, I didn't have any misreads or anything either. I wanted to point out that the rendering style, I've never seen him with this style before, but I love the sort of abbreviated brush that he's using in this. It made me wonder what his sort of internal referent is for it, because I was kind of ticking it off. Like, is it Milt Caniff? Is it, I mean, somebody later and cruder than that, like Mignola? Or, what is it? Or is it just him attempting that in his own kind of idiom? I think that's kind of what I settled on, is this is not a particular person he's knocking. It's just like, I'm going to do the hard shadow 50% style now, or 40%.
Yeah, that's something that I was interested in, that I wanted to ask you guys, because you know so much about comics. Can you place all those styles and say, oh, this is clearly inspired by this guy and this is inspired by this artist? Because I can't really do that. There's a lot of Jeff Darrow I've noticed.
Right, yeah, the Jeff Darrow ones jumped out to me.
That's the only one that stood out to me.
Right, we're not quite there yet. Well, yeah, I suppose
it's kind of this thing that he's doing, but I don't know that it's a particular artist so much as you just kind of think like he's going for a European.
Like clean line with texture, with the accumulated texture, like mild accumulated texture, yeah.
And like flatter colors in general, not totally flat, but this feels very Jeff Darrow, Seth Fisher, Langdon Foss. Like there's a bunch of kind of, I think of American artists that are doing the European clean line thing, and that's kind of how this looks to me as well. But yeah, that's the fun game to play. Like I was trying to figure out the whole time who this reminds me of, and to me this looks like him doing a Travis Charest like kind of line, but without the cross hatching that Travis Charest does. I don't know, but also kind of looks like Kick-Ass, but that's definitely not the John Romita Jr. look, because his look is so peculiar. And then this one, yeah, it's more like, this just looks like J.H. Williams' natural style to me. It's just colored flatter, right? It's like you take what he's doing here and take the washes out of it, and color it flat, and you get that, which is kind of what it looked like at the beginning of Promethea. And this is also, I don't know if you know, but this character Chase is the book that he got popular on before Promethea.
Oh, I had no idea.
This character here, and this is kind of the style that he was using before he really blossomed out in Promethea. It starts, about like what he normally does, but without the wash. So I'm not sure if there's a particular thing he's aiming at here other than just, I don't know. The flatness of the color is where you get the Mignola from, right?
Yeah, right. And like I said, I didn't think, hey, he's looking at Mignola. I just mean that like the people who are proximal to that style, depending on what generation you are and how, impressed you are by each of those individual people, you could see that as a style that refers to several different people, the rendering style specifically, not the drawing. I think he's so beyond in drawing ability. He's so beyond most of the other people who would be in that category that it's not really, it doesn't look like them,
Yeah, the only other person I would say on this is Ryan Sook, who's someone who kind of merged Adam Hughes and Mike Mignola together. So I do think there's some Adam Hughes in there. But it would be weird for him to be like aping Ryan Sook, because I would think
No.
they were like contemporaries who are kind of working in the same, kind of came up on the
Yeah.
same stuff. So yeah, I think that's one of the fun things about this. I think less so in this volume actually than some of the earlier and later stuff, but the collision of styles on the page was a lot of fun. So Miel, you weren't there was like, were there any where you were looking at it and you, coming from your background, were identifying things at all?
No, not that much actually. No, just the Geoff Darrow looking line work. Um, that's really it. Yeah, I couldn't really place most of the art styles, but they're very effective always.
And you could tell that some of it is pure like production technique. Like, okay, every time her sister is going to appear, she's always going to be in a color hold.
Yeah.
So this is something that you took pretty far in your book, Miel. But this subverting the line by colorizing the line, where you can kind of push back different elements or have them have less prominence and not have this kind of hard black edge to everything by softening up into a color hold.
Yeah.
But you,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, but you can imagine how effective that is as a narrative technique too, not just as a color technique. Like, okay, every time we see these characters and they're fighting, like I'm going to use this thing. It's a very interesting thing, and Echo Lands I think is in a lot of ways the logical extreme of that. It's the end point of that because every character has their own, every character has their own style that they're carrying with them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a bit much for me. That
Like
was really a
visually.
lot. All those different styles. I think I preferred this book, but
Hmm.
um, I guess it's more rereadable. You can keep reading the Echo Lens book because there's so many little Easter
Right.
eggs and so it certainly has its advantages.
The density is so high. Yeah, like visual
Right.
density.
Yeah.
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 Well, and if you're
That's
not
one of the
familiar with all of the artists that he's referencing, that might make it even denser. Because like when I'm looking at this, I can kind of get like it's a narrative technique as well. Because
Mhm.
like you're talking about, Sean, the color holds and stuff. Well, that's something that Adam Hughes would have done a lot of. He was one of the first guys I noticed colorizing his lines in a realistic effect like this looks quite a bit like Adam Hughes, and he did a character called Ghost. Like this is almost
Hmm.
a cover from Adam Hughes's run on Ghost, like the girl in the white cloak holding the gun. So I think there's like narrative value in that if you know the references, but if you don't, then it's kind of like watching that Spider-Man movie that just came out that had like the Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. And it's like if you haven't watched those old movies, you don't get the intensity of some of the moments in there. So that's kind of what I was curious with Miel is you still seem to be able to enjoy it and the styles still speak to you, even though you don't know exactly who they're referencing to, which
Well,
is
damn. I mean, look at that, man. It's hard to argue with that. Look at that graveyard scene. I mean, it's just a freaking amazing painting looking object, and the fact that we don't know whether that was painted in grayscale or painted in full color matters not a lick to me because the actual effect is quite stunning. This
Yeah,
is
I
a
agree. It looks amazing. And the way I look at it in a lot of his books, in J.H. Williams's books, the art style is almost kind of a soundtrack. Like when a certain character pops up, this style follows the character around the way that in Star Wars you have the evil Empire team that follows Darth
mm,
Vader. And it's the same for also the layouts, I think. When this we haven't talked about the story yet, but the villain is kind of a spooky ghost lady. And every time she makes an appearance, not only the art style changes, but also the layouts of the pages. And yeah, so even without getting the references, it still has a really strong effect, and it helps to communicate what's happening in the story, I think.
yeah, I like that idea of it's like a motif, like the visual motif follows the character and the layout motif. Yeah, that's really interesting. And that allows him also, like here where she's breaking all their bones, he'll flip the style to be black and white and kind of fuzzy to look like an X-ray, and you get narrative weight out of that. This was another one where I was having trouble placing this. I think Phil Hester's the closest artist I could think here. But I thought that these guys have a kind of strange cartooniness to them that's different.
I love the break-in titles. I still am hungry to know whether this is a direct influence of Gene Day and his work on Master Kung Fu, or whether that's like a Steranko or even like a Will Eisner influence. You know, the three big ones that I can think of that used that to such great effect. But this is a cool little version of that here.
I think that's got to be just like a lineage, right? Starting with Eisner, and then people pick up on that and do it different ways. Yeah, and he's always been really good at that, in integrating that, because he's not only like such an amazing draftsman, but like Miel, you said that when you saw other people attempt this, it didn't work as well, and that's because he's such a good designer. Like, even to pick out, they're in this video game place, and you pick out this wild pattern, and you're putting that against like this yellow, and it should be hard to look at. It should almost hurt, but he's able to make it flow still.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite pages.
This one.
And I give a lot of credit to Dave Stewart for that. The coloring in the whole book is amazing, especially this section. I really like what they did with this.
And I wonder how much, you know, because JH can paint. He'll paint on the pages as well. And so I wonder how much he's giving color notes. Like, I need this to be like these kind of magenta purples against the yellows, or how much he trusts, you know, they've worked together enough to trust the colorist. This was where I saw Travis Charest, for people who know that reference. This is where I saw that most strongly in the character design and the drawing when I'm playing that game. Here's the Jeff Darrow stuff again. I do think it's really interesting also because this is a hell of a challenge. And I know Dave did it a lot in Cerebus, and it's something I play with quite a bit, but it really is hard to get people who carry such different styles to exist in the same place, like have gravity together. And that's, I think, the thing that most impresses me, besides the technical chops of mimicking all these styles without, you know, he's not doing photo reference or anything. He says he can just visualize it all. To also get them to sit together within all of that seems like an extra skill on top.
Yeah. And here we have more obviously wash painted with possibly color highlight areas, full color painted areas, and then manipulated. And the effect is just like a masterful, you know, transparent color painting.
And this is the Miel, you can give us a little more of the plot here. Maybe this is the ghost you were referring to.
Yeah. Yeah, it turns out in a later volume. How much can we spoil the story or talk
as
about
much as we want? Yeah. This has been out since what, 2015? We're good.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah, it turns out there's this organization called Medusa, and they can bring I guess ghost stories to life, or urban legends. And in this first volume, Batwoman faces one of these urban legends. It's a mother who had her children drowned because she was an alcoholic or something, and now this ghost is roaming around and abducting children. And I believe this is that ghost, that's that ghost mom. And as soon as she pops up, the whole layout of the page changes, and it's a really strong effect. It's something I like a lot.
It gets very liquid, right? Like the panels just merge into each other. That's something else that's always impressed me about J.H. Williams, is when you have bizarre panel structures, shapes that are determined by the overall layout of the page, it then becomes extra tricky to make sure that, like, within this like trapezoidal figure, that you also have an effective composition. So he's having to compose not in rectangles a lot, and that's something that not a lot of people ever even try, much less succeed at regularly.
It's no wonder that this was so striking. I mean, obviously it's striking for anybody, but it's striking for you, Miel, because he's kind of the anti-Peo. Peo? How do you pronounce?
Peo, something Peo? Like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Peo, you know, is that fair to say he's the most famous Belgian cartoonist of all time?
Hergé might be in the running as well. It's either one of those two. Yeah.
Okay, well, if you think about it, like everything is in a box, right? And it's always in uniform style, and
Yeah.
it's a fairly practical technique because it means that they could serialize his stuff in one form, and you could chop it up and recompose a page if you needed to. If you were going to put out a kid's book or something that was formatted in a different way, you could have 4 panels per page instead of 6 or whatever, and it always works, right? Or
Yeah.
you could put them all in a row. But obviously, like this is the sort of end stage of comics as composition, where you've broken apart the border already. You've changed the size of the house. You've moved it into the neighbor's house. You've made the stable in the living room. Now everything is fair game. There's no boundaries. It's all there. At the same time, you still have to communicate, right? Which is the great feat that's going on.
And yeah, like you imagine trying to flip any of this for translation or anything that just doesn't work. So you're basically insisting that this has to be read left to right. I think this page here is the most stylistically diverse one out of the book. There's a lot more of this kind of stuff in the Greg Rucka volumes and then some of the later volumes here where he's drawing the monsters and he's going into that wash style that he's doing on the monsters, and then all these different characters kind of have their own style. I also really like the designy aspect of all of these circles over that are showing like a mental like note taking, that she's like, I don't know who this character is, I've got info on that character, and he's including that kind of infographics type of approach that I think Chris Ware brought to comics. So something that's pretty outside of the mainstream is being integrated in a compelling way right there. And also you get those Gene Day things again with those more graphic kind of moments filling the page. So this was one of my favorite spreads out of that sequence.
Yeah, I always think about what a tremendous influence Muka has had on our culture. And how popular he was as a sort of target for poster makers in the 60s, and how he basically ruled illustration 50 years after he stopped working. 40 years after he stopped working, his influence was, he was essentially the most influential illustrator in the world 50 years after he was done. I can see all of that in J.H. Williams's compositions. And it's always interesting to me to like see something like that and just wonder, like, is this all secondhand or third hand? Is he only coming to that through comics influence, or obviously he can paint like a motherfucker? So, his painting training, Muka is also interesting in the conversation because, of course, he composed both for oil painting. He was an incredible oil painter, but also composed for flat color with small amounts of allowance for gradation and soft tone and things like that. So he rides both those lines there too.
And that the color holds on the lines and stuff. I feel like Muka was doing that kind of stuff, and that's like, you're going back to where I was pointing out the Adam Hughes stuff. Adam Hughes was very obviously biting a lot of Alphonse Muka and a lot of his cover work. And so I think, there's a very clear lineage. I mean, obviously J.H. Williams has looked at and knows Alphonse Muka, but when you're getting this character here, I do think you are very intentionally in that lineage that you're referring to.
Well, and compositionally as well. I mean, he's the him and some of the other turn of the century illustrators that were really important to composition are the people who introduced sort of compositional units in the way that he's using it there on the right. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there's a ton of at least Western art history that involves those kinds of like floating units like that. Maybe if you go back to like, I don't even know, like Russian icon paintings or something like that, where you've got like physical units that are being filled by a single composition. But this is a weird thing for pen and paper, until somebody does it, and then it's a great thing.
Yeah, the moments like this,
right? Exactly.
This is Miel, the kind of stylistic thing you're
gorgeous.
talking about when he's dealing with the ghost, right? The big blobby.
Yeah, the
And I
big
think
blocky panels, shapes. Yeah. I wonder how much these pages go for. Does he sell those? Because they must be super valuable. That's nobody does anything like this in comics. Uh, does he
well,
talk
there's
about?
I don't
I don't
know
know.
if he sells them or not. I mean,
He
when you
should.
see the originals, yeah, they're pretty much art pieces because he
Yeah.
does ink wash all over them and paint on them often. And you never know when he actually painted a color and when it's David Stewart coloring an ink wash, which is always kind of another fun game. Like I'm getting a little bit better. Like this is definitely computer colored, but it's hard to tell. And he did that in Promethea too. You know, there's whole issues that are painted. Well, it looks like oils or acrylics. You know,
Mhm.
it's like in the style of Van Gogh or something. So, Sean, I think you're right that his influences go far, far outside of comics. Even though oftentimes you can peg a comic artist as a referent. Um, you know, like this style here, he doesn't do much of this in this volume, but this is the style he uses when her dad is remembering his military
Right.
days, and it's very much more uh kind of like in the Milt Caniff like photorealist comic strip style, but also some Dave Mazzucchelli like Batman Year One vibes in there.
That's
um
interesting because the color, maybe it's just because of who we were talking about in the composition and everything, but I was thinking Arthur Rackham, uh, you know,
mm,
for
with
this
this right
page. Yeah.
here, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the face, the way
Gotcha.
he's illustrating this face versus the clean line.
I see.
It's a little bit more uh, newspaper strip art there.
Rackham was the other person I was thinking of in terms of the sort of blobby. Uh, what do you call that? Nested composition. I mean, um, I suppose that's a good a term as any.
I think like you're just talking about like how Miel does a meta composition over the page is there's like a picture made
Hmm.
by the panels almost. A lot of times they're explicitly like a Batman symbol or something,
Right.
or here like the lightning bolt, and then you know all those elements. But then it has to flow like this too within that. There's kind of the curve of the flow through it. So he's like multiple compositions kind of stacking on top of each other.
Right.
That sounds really good. Meta composition. I like that. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, when we were talking about though, when I was making the perhaps spurious argument that Muka and people like Rackham or whatever were the people who first, or maybe the arts and crafts movement. I guess you can have examples of that too. Having mild, small pictures within the big one that are sort of each have an individual shape or unit or whatever that are interesting. I mean, even the first comics, I mean, are back to the Peyo thing where the if you read sorry, I'm blanking on his name right now, Toffler or something, you could rearrange his pages visually, and it might not make it narrative sense, but it would look just as good, or just as bad, or whatever you want to say, visually, because they don't relate to each other. They're in their own boundaries. Whereas if you look at like a Muka like bicycle ad, he's got all these like slivers that each give you their own information, and they're functionally related to each other shape wise in a way that is undisturbable. You can't take one piece and like move it to another place because it doesn't look right anymore. They're connected to each other. That's all I'm getting at.
And the arts and crafts movement's a good read too, because you think about like the William Morris Caldecott Bible or something like that, with all of the embedded illustrations and blocks of text and the letters that are
Right.
like the special illustrated letters. And
Yeah.
yeah, that makes a lot of sense too.
Let's see if I can remember the name for that. They're called. I can't remember. It's got a pseudo Latin name. Okay. Oh well.
The big fancy letters. Yeah, I always forget what those are called.
Capita something head. Oh well, I don't recall.
And then
Pseudo
here,
Latin.
Neil, you're talking about how he'll use different panel styles to suggest different characters. So anytime it's like the Batwoman stuff, it's very sharp and angular and lots of diagonals. And then here he's kind of subtly crashing the two together, where this is more like a standard comic page, and this is pretty close, but like she comes in and there starts to be like a tilt here. There's a little sliver. So there's some of the diagonals cutting against an otherwise pretty stable grid. I think that's a really subtle little mix of the motifs, maybe.
Yeah, there's a few pages like that. There's one, I don't know, I think it's in the beginning of the book where they go underground to her basement, and the bottom of the page is above ground, and the top is below ground, is above ground, and the bottom is below ground, and you gradually see the layout change according to how close you get to her bat cave or her hideout place.
Interesting.
And, that's an example of that, but there's a lot of examples.
And it's like a subtle little thing too, like the offset is just a little bit, and then it gets crazier as it goes. And then here we're getting back to the swirl. Well, now we've introduced the fire character, so we're going to get some fire versus water. That's one of the things that they're going to come to realize. And then this scene here cracked me up. I don't know if you two got as much of a giggle out of this as I did, where
I didn't really giggle. It was very brutal.
It was what?
It was very brutal. You see this girl getting murdered almost, and at the same time something else entirely is going on. It's a strong juxtaposition. Didn't make me giggle, but it was a strong effect.
Well, maybe I'm just have a darker sense of humor than you.
I think you do.
I just enjoyed that they like he's basically putting these two opposites against each other. And so while she's going home with this cop that she's been dating and having a sexual encounter, I think it's her niece, who's also her sidekick, is going out and is gonna get murdered. But the thing that gave me a giggle here, but it's also, pretty bleak, is that while she's basically receiving oral sex, then his words are like, "You're a tasty piece of sweets. I'm gonna have a slice. You're getting warm inside. Aren't you the juicy one?"
Geez.
And I thought that was just, juxtaposing like that language that is both violent language, but also like in the other context would be just like, kind of over the top sexy talk. It's both intense, but also, I don't know, there's something about that that's darkly humorous to me.
It was very effective for me. I immediately hated this character, and we don't know him yet. It's the first time we see him, but what a douchebag. I want him to be beat up by Batwoman now. I found this really effective, this page, this sequence.
It's time to throttle him, Batwoman. Imagine if he had if these were colorized, to equal intensity here. What a mess this would look like. I mean, you could conceive of it with like opposite color palettes or something like that. But I think this is a quite effective way of muting the thing that should be the pushing one of them back a little bit. It's an interesting technique.
Well, and it's really an effective, like, kind of emotional gut punch as well, because that you're setting up that she's gonna later come to realize that this happened while she was off screwing around, right? And that even by painting it in black and white, there's kind of if you did make this like the colorful rainbow thing, with all the explosions and I'm having a great time, I don't know, like by doing it this way, it feels like kind of a hollow experience anyways, where she's not really in love or anything. She's just kind of soothing some of her own wounds by having a casual night, and the regret that will come with that later, that, she kind of potentially threw away her niece's life for a hollow one night stand. I think that gives it a lot more emotional impact. And that's where I think, Miel, you're saying I didn't find that funny. It like made me, sick. Like, it's kind of like in Breaking Bad where the girlfriend, spoilers on that too, where
you're
the
gonna
girlfriend
spoil
dies.
Breaking Bad too, dude.
But where the girlfriend dies from the heroin overdose, and they kind of like idly sit by and let it happen. There's a emotional grossness to that that's really ramped up, I think, by not introducing the color until the end.
So what you're saying is Miel had the proper response, and you had the jaundiced response of someone who's read too many comics.
I just older and just like whatever, life happens. No, I just laughed at the technique,
Yeah.
you know. I
Yeah, no,
thought
no, it's yeah,
it's
it's intense.
it's brave, like, because
Yeah.
it, you know, I don't know. It when you lean into that kind of sexual innuendo, I think you're kind of automatically leaning into potential humor. And I don't, maybe the fact that I even got a giggle out of it means that was a, you know, the risk it pays off, depends on who's reading it, you know.
Right. And then we immediately go into the other style, you know, we're back to the clean line, flat color here.
Looking like it's colored by Brandon with
Yeah,
like the
right.
Sherberts and stuff like that.
Hmm. In the daylight hours.
Yeah.
Man, oh man, how many different abilities do you have to put together a comic like this?
Yeah, I don't know. And then you're writing on top of it. And then here he goes into, it looks like now he's doing his version of the Amy Reeder, the artist that was in that shared the Zero volume with him. It looks like this is him doing her style, but he's a better drafts person. So it's like, I don't know, that's like what she's trying to do, but he's nailing it a little better. So that's an interesting to me to see those two, and when he brings her back in some of the later volumes, you know. And like Miel said, she's trying to keep those layouts, or I don't know if he's doing the layouts, but they're trying to keep a consistency. And it's interesting to compare the two of them, just to see two different hands taking the same approach.
Right. We talked about that in the Echolands flip through when he's doing a Jack Kirby, which he does impeccably, but then he draws the stuff sometimes from an angle that Jack Kirby would never draw it from, or nobody has crossed eyes, or you know, like small little variations that are essentially like just about having greater draftsperson facility, that kind of actually make it a slightly uncanny experience sometimes, you know.
Well, it's like more structurally stable underneath, but then
Right.
he'll
There you go.
nail the kind of the stylistic gloss that
Hmm.
goes on top, which is, yeah, that's what I'm saying, is like these are more realistic proportioned faces than that other
Right.
artist would do, but the actual quality of the line is almost exactly the same. And
Right.
it's a really weird thing to compare and look at.
It's the same with the Kirby one. I mean, the structural stability is structural instability is part of what makes Kirby look like Kirby.
Yeah.
That he draws it different from a different angle. You know, it's not. He doesn't. You know, Kirby didn't sculpt a Kirby head. He doesn't have a Reed Richards head that he's then rotating and looking at in real life. He's got abstracted views that differ depending on the angle that he's approaching.
That's something
Anyway,
he talked about in the interview you did with him, right? That
right,
he always has the same base or skeleton, I guess,
right.
and then the style is something he applies on top of that. So that would, yeah, cause this, that the proportions are always more realistic and different from the original inspiration.
Right.
And
Yeah.
the fact that he gets those realistic proportions, I mean, Sean just immediately assumed he was using cameras all over the place, which
Right.
I think is a fair assumption. And then to find out that he doesn't, it's like, I don't know, we all just want to go jump off a building, right? So now we're entering into, this is the final of the 5 issues,
Yeah.
correct?
Yep.
I really like this sequence here, both visually and in the writing, where she's meditating and just free associating her way to the solution. And I think his little inset panels really get that sense of just jumping from one idea to another. I could imagine, like, I've always thought you could do a comic that was basically this, but you could cover all of existence spilling out of one moment, and then you just free associate your way from there to all things. And there's a bit of that going on. You know, this is like the proto version of that.
Look at the face on the very bottom of the panel there. That's why I assumed that there was some type of reference involved in a lot of this, is because having like that two discrete lighting sources on a single face and having it rendered both minimally but also in a way that suggests both those lighting sources accurately. I mean, that's just a hell of a thing. I'm not going to compare it's difficult. I'm always tempted to use my own experiences, but I'm not going to I'm not fit to to criticize somebody that can draw that, and let alone somebody who can pull that out of their head. I just mean that like the see how there's a secondary light that's behind her that's causing that area of midtone underneath her cheekbone there. That's just something that it's just, I mean, I can see it when I'm looking at a model, but imagining that is not, not within my skill set, and not something I don't even know how you get to that,
Yeah. I mean, that was always my assumption too, until I heard him talk about not using photos. Is like those are this is the reason I started using photos, is because it allowed me to get results like that, right?
Right.
And
Sure.
to not have the photo is then like, what the hell?
The lighting on that one is amazing. I just love that one right there. I'd be very curious how much of that is grayscale painted, and how much of that has actual, J.H. Williams applied color.
On this right here,
Yep.
I think that's all grayscales.
How
You can see
about
pretty strong where the wash is at.
How about the building in the background and all that?
I think that's all probably a wash. It
Yeah.
looks like. Here it's yeah, this is probably all wash stuff.
I wonder, because in Echo Lens, he seemed to like the stronger colors he wanted to anchor or whatever when he's. I have no idea why he did it, but looking at his originals, he would paint in like the rocket ship with a big bright yellow, presumably because he had the yellow on hand and was like, "This is what it's got to be. This one right here," and similar with the bright reds. So just curious.
Oh, up here.
Sure.
But there's an evenness to the texture that carries over underneath.
Sure.
That makes me suspect that that's the colorist working on top, and then you can get that more intense computerized red, or like these little moments of like the more yellow seafoam green peeking through. Those look like they would be more easily achieved on the computer.
I did want to ask you, Miel, because your color work is so I was going to say uniform, but actually that seems like that could almost be a pejorative. It's so scenic based. Like every scene has its own temperature, and every and its own palette. How does this strike you as a colorist who's very organized in a storytelling sense? How does this strike you from a color perspective?
Yeah, that's interesting. The first thing that stands out to me is that the red is always used in really interesting ways, because it could be strange to just have this one red character in a completely gray background, but it's always done in a way that's really effective. There's often these extra design lines, these red lines on top of everything else, or these red text boxes that make the composition a lot more interesting than you would originally think. So the first thing that I notice is the way the red is used. And yeah, Dave Stewart is just really good at what he does. So it's I'm in awe of how it's done in this book.
And you're
me,
right. Like if these would have been white all the way
exactly.
through, that's a very different effect. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, I wonder if this is something that they talk about in advance, or do they just come up with that on the spot or afterwards?
It seems like that has to be somewhat controlled by J.H. Williams, because there's so many times where he is using like black, white, and red as the dominant kind of design theme, that it seems like the page has to like here, you're working with, I mean, this is the cover obviously, but you're working with a big flat red and a black and a white, and that has to be kind of in there from the get-go for anything else to make sense, right? Because you've got a character who's rendered with like super kabuki pale white skin and bright red hair, so like red hair, and then a black costume. Like you just have to be designing around that all the time.
We actually talked about this pretty heavily in our Gene Day flip through, Gene Day videos, because when you're making meta compositions like this, color use is such a critical component. Something can just not read correctly if somebody has broken it up in a way that doesn't make sense. And you're absolutely right that just looking at the trickle of red across that page with those little speech bubbles or sorry, the little internal
Just captions, yeah.
captions. Imagine that yellow, or imagine that green, or imagine those white. It's just a completely different effect. And
Well,
I think the more you design across the page, the more critical it is to have your color be a unifying factor.
and also this is something I've been thinking a lot about with bound, because I'm binding myself to 9 colors, and one of them is much darker and more dominant. And then there's an orange in there that I have to use really limited. So I think part of what he has to at least be doing visually is he's using like the red as the anchor point for the flow of the composition, but then he's has to organize, like if you start learning about Gestalt psychology, there's, and I've been trying to get better at this when I'm looking at compositions in general, is there's always like a default way that your brain organizes a composition, whether it be a single painting or a page of comics, but you can organize along different principles. So you could organize on the similarity of red, or you could organize on the similarity of green, or you could organize on directional forces or panel sizes or whatever.
Or value. In that case of that page, he's got a value organization that bounds the entire thing together.
Or like this one might be a better example, because like you can bind these two as like the dominant things if you pay attention to that color scheme, or you can have the red dominating, or you can have the light dominating against the dark. So there's at least 3 different kind of ways you could mentally reorganize the page. And I think probably starting around the black, the red, and the white gives you the 1, and then you see where those imbalances kind of are, and then you'll organize the other things to balance them out. Now, I don't think he's sitting there like doing that like a mathematician. I think it's probably all very intuitive, but I would imagine that red, and even knowing like here, the red isn't as intense, it's grayed down because these need to pop forward. And some of that has to be being done by him mentally when he's composing, and then some of it has to be being done by the colorist, obviously. It seems like a crazy
each other.
Yeah, crazy collaboration. But you can, this page is a good example too, like are you gonna use the eyes as the main organizing factor? Are you gonna use the colors as the main organizing factor? Or are you gonna use the reds as the main organizing factor?
I have to say, like, I as a person who thinks in value, I think more than anything else, I was shocked when I first saw the black and white pages from Centralia, because you essentially made each page have its own value structure, and then you subverted the value structure when you did the coloring, in the sense that because you colorized almost every line. I'm not mistaken, am I? Almost everything is colorized. So you push back different areas of hatching that might have had the equal level of hatching. Like you might have hatched like a 30% for a background, but then you've turned it into like a pale yellow or something.
I fix my mistakes with coloring. That's all it is. There's no real science behind it. It's just me trying to fix the mistakes and create a bit of depth in the page.
Yeah, depth. That's interesting, right? Because if you were doing that purely in black and white, then that would have been part of your value scheme in the first place. But there are certain practical limitations when it comes to building up value and hatching alone.
Yeah, sometimes I just want a certain texture, but then it becomes too dark, and then I have to color the lines to push it back a little bit. That's how that goes. and also, I just like the look of colored lines, and I notice that a lot of artists do it nowadays. They just make all the lines blue or red or something like that, and they barely use any black. But yeah, that also is an effect that you can go for, and it's really nice.
It seems a little bit more sophisticated to me. Like there's an extra thing you have to consider to get it to work. So when you're saying that you use it to like cover over mistakes, it's like, I don't know, because I feel like even if you looked at your black and white page and got all the textures and values the way you wanted, I still think you would contribute something else by colorizing some of the lines. Or would you leave it if it was like you were perfectly happy and you didn't feel like you were fixing value mistakes?
Well, it also adds some emotional value, the colors. So that's also something I try to take into account. And in the case of Centralia, because a lot of it is about a really hot city with underground fires and all that, I try to make everything as warm as possible. So that's why a lot of the lines become orange and red, even when they don't really have to be, because it's then you have this feeling of a glow of hotness, of heat.
Yeah, and I think that's something that they're using in here as well, right? They're kind of like you're talking about these motifs that follow the characters. There's colors that follow the characters, and like Sean said, production tricks that follow characters, and those all add up. And that's why I think, yeah, with your work as well, I don't know that it's something that just looks like you're covering over mistakes. It all seems to have very intentional meaning to me.
That's a great close up there. I'm really glad that they include that shot right there on the right.
Mhm.
I think this is the cover for the next issue. And here you see this is the Amy Reader taking over and mimicking his
Yeah.
wash style and her style. And that's going into the next volume then.
And she did that cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. It says AR right here.
All right. That's probably the most impressive drawing of hers I've seen.
And then can you imagine like
Yeah,
you're tasked with like, okay, now you have to keep all of his kind of design and like keep the vibe. I don't know if he was contributing layouts or not, but like it doesn't look like it because
No.
this isn't his same Batwoman sharp edgy style.
No. That's I can't God forbid somebody has to follow up a performance like that. So it's a very different comic.
It would be a hell of a challenge. And just like a couple things, the one style, this is that style I was talking about that feels more Milt Kniffy
Yeah.
or also Dave Mazzucchelli. This is something
right.
that's
Mazzucchelli, that was the other person I was thinking of. If somebody grew up in the early 80s or whatever, they'd be like, Mazzucchelli. Mid 80s.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. And the coloration is totally Batman Year One on this. So that
Right.
like for sure they're referencing that. But that was one of the ones that when I was like, hey, we're gonna be reading Batwoman, awesome. I remember J.H. Williams nailing that style. I'm looking forward to reading it. And then there's not much of it in those first 5 issues. So I had to go looking through the book for some of it, you know, just so we could point out. Because I feel like this is like the furthest he gets from his own natural style in the book almost. And just how well he nails that as well.
Yeah, he uses that in the flashback sequence in issue 0 as well. But yeah, it's
a little bit,
yeah, a couple pages. But yeah, it's quite nice. It's quite amazing. And as we've talked about many times, like I mean, you know, someone could make an entire career out of being one of these people, let alone having 4 of them be here. So I actually read this out of sequence. I didn't realize. I read this one out of sequence. Yeah, this issue right here. So he did this entire one, right? So when did this come out?
I don't know. There starts to be issues where like Amy Reader's doing the issues, and that buys him time to do one, and then she'll do a couple more, and then like Wonder Woman comes in, and he takes over, and he's drawing his version of Cliff Chang, I think is the artist's name, who was doing Wonder Woman at the time with Brian Azzarello. So he's actually, the way he's drawing Wonder Woman syncs up with how she would have looked in her own book at the time. So anyways, I had put a couple other pages on here because I had the whole chunk and I wanted to flip through it once I got going because I love looking at his stuff. And it was like, yeah, if you're gonna get this, definitely make sure you're getting his entire run, because it will start to look like he's done, and then he'll come back in and you'll get some more, you know, couple issues of really amazing stuff like this, and then he'll dip out for a couple more issues. So for anyone interested in reading this that hasn't read it yet, either the omnibus that collects it all, or making sure that you kind of look on Wikipedia or whatever to know how far his run goes, because it's definitely worth the interstitial issues where there's someone else drawing it to then get the story to his next issue. And he's writing all the way through the Batwoman stuff. Greg Rucka writes this earlier detective comic stuff. And this is this character of her sister kind of becomes integral to the end of issue 5 of what we were looking at.
Right.
And that's where I was wondering, like, for someone who hasn't read this, she becomes kind of part of the story, and it's like, how would that even make sense here where she shows up?
I think she talked about, she explained to her sidekick that her sister had drowned, and then when she's also drowning and she's seeing this face, it made sense that this was the sister that was mentioned earlier.
Okay, cool. That's good to know, because when I have the context and then I see that you might need the context, then I'm always curious, like, how well did they pull that off? For because it was like starting over at the New 52.
Yeah.
So how that's a big thing too. You're kind of starting over at number 1, but carrying the story over. That's a big task as a writer. So it's good to know that worked for someone who
But
didn't
I really
have
want
context.
to check it out now, especially the pages with Wonder Woman. They looked really good, so
Oh,
I'm gonna check it out.
yeah, the Wonder Woman stuff is, and he really starts doing this kind of what you see showing up like in Echo Lands and in Sandman, where there's a lot more stylistic variety per character. That kind of really takes off in these issues as well. So yeah, I highly recommend the whole run. But I appreciate, Miel, you giving me a reason to jump back into this, because I've had this around, but have just been like reading new stuff and not reading things I've already read.
So how heavy is that book, Carson?
I don't know. This, like you said, Strange Death could kill somebody. This is a chunk of a book. It's at least 6 or 7 pounds.
Oh
Let
my
me
God.
see how many pages it is. It's got all these omnibus. I don't know. It doesn't have a page count on it. But the omnibus always comes with like also like all the variant covers, and they'll have like scripts, and you can see some of his black and white art and things like that. I haven't read all that, but maybe it has some of how he collaborated too. That they usually have that kind of stuff. So if you can afford the omnibuses, it's usually like a cool way to get all of everything, for people who are real obsessive about every variant cover and sketchbooks and all that kind of thing.
It's interesting to see finally superhero stuff, which for so long has been thought about almost solely as like a corporate product that could be made by anybody, and like you slot in the next cog, to actually seeing it be marketed as like the work of a particular person. Like, hey, here's all of J.H. Williams' stuff that he did on this particular thing. I think that some of the companies were kind of hesitant to do that for a while, because that was the official line, is that the people don't matter, it's the characters that matter, right? But then over time, it's like, well, clearly the person who made this with their pen or their brush is the person who matters. So how about you give us our Neil Adams, and we don't really give a shit about the Green Arrow. Like, we want to look at some Neil Adams comics. So how about it, man?
Yeah.
I mean, so it seems like some of that is finally happening.
But it's not the case where, like, I guess maybe because he's the writer, but I've seen other omnibus like this where you have someone who has a pretty steady run, but they have like a couple fill-in issues and they'll keep the fill-in issues there. I feel like the people that are there just for the creators would be like, well, you take out all the fill-in issues, like just show me the J.H. Williams art. Like, I don't need the fill-in artist. But because he was the writer, and because there is a continuity of the story between the Greg Rucka and his writing, I think it also in this case works as like, here's that storyline that you all really liked all in one package, and it just kind of syncs up with this is also everything he did on the character.
Well, so Miel, is this going to be an influence on your next book in any way?
Well, the thing is, I know that the two of you liked the page compositions that I did in Centralia, but some of the reviews I got in Belgium were not really positive about it. So I think I'm doing it a little bit less now. I'm trying to see what I can do with a more traditional page layouts, and most of the pages have 4 layers, 4 rows of panels, and they're often just one big, very long horizontal panel. And I want to see if I can make it feel more cinematic than the previous book. So there's a lot of pages that are more like that, but there is a bit of playing with perspective going on as well. The story again takes place in a big futuristic city, so there is a lot of architecture and perspective tricks still. But I wouldn't say that I'm going in this direction at the moment.
Do
It
you
was
think
interesting.
that's a cultural thing that they're just rejecting it because they're so used to that, like, four panel chop it up, rearrange it type of lineage?
Yeah, probably.
And
Um,
is the French reaction different?
I don't know. I haven't read a lot of reviews from from the French side yet,
Okay.
but I'm going to a convention next week in France uh, for multiple days, so I guess I'll get a better view of the perception of the book then. I don't know yet. It's
Okay.
yeah, we'll see.
This is probably a good place as any to announce that we'll run a real brief, a month long, let's say, contest for the English edition of Centralia. So any reviews that we get within the sound of my voice to a month from now that are, you either message me with the review or you let me know in some other way that you made this review. I'm going to put them all into a hat, and I will draw the number out of the hat, and the person who wins that will win an unbound copy of the book as well as the number one of 100 signed copy by Miel. And we would love to see more reviews. I know people really love the book because they wrote me messages and told me. But getting it on review sites like Goodreads and Amazon and Barnes and Noble and places like that is how other people know that you love the book. And it's really important for a small press book like this, and especially from a book by a debut by a cartoonist. And I'm glad to hear that you're going to a convention. I'm hoping that it goes well. Nobody tries to fist fight you, telling you that you slandered all of the self-pollinating plant men out there.
My French is really bad. If they were trying to insult me, I wouldn't notice. So
We should say Carson has a book out very, very soon as well, because Diamond, about 2 weeks ago, received their copies of The Abolition of Man collected edition. And our Kickstarter backers, save the 4 people who I messed up their book plates, should also be receiving their copy of Abolition of Man. And I'm actually wearing my The Luddites Were Right t-shirt. And I promised...
Sexy shirt there.
Yeah, I like it, huh?
Yeah.
So I promised Miel I would tell him who the Luddites were. The Luddites led a attempted revolution against automated weaving, and they were introduced to some type of weaving machine that didn't involve a shuttlecock going back and forth, and they foresaw that it would be the end of their guild. And the end of the work that they were all employed doing, and so they took up arms against the machines and attempted to smash all the machines, so that they could continue to do the work that they were doing. And I think their story has a great resonance now. And yes, this T-shirt was machine illustrated.
Yes, entirely AI illustrated. But I
This
mean,
motto,
Luddite has just become a term for anyone who's technological progress since then.
yeah.
Yeah. But they may indeed prove to be right. And it's interesting that it would have happened. I didn't know that it started with weaving, but that has like algorithm built into it, right? Like to weave a carpet, you have to have like a program to get the certain pattern. So that would have been like Charles Babbage and Lady Lovelace were taking some of those ideas and turning them into early computing. So that's actually, you filled in something there for me that makes even more sense.
Well, assuming that I'm right, I actually haven't looked up any of these things. Probably has been 2 decades since I read about it. So if I'm wrong, you can tell me in the comments.
Yes, please. I hope you're right, though, because it makes a lot of sense.
Well, it's too good not to make sense on some level.
I just accept it whether it's true or not, because we're in that world anyways. Like Elon, Bill, real quick, but I know Sean's got to go, but Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, MMA fight in the Colosseum in Rome, supposedly.
is that the plan?
That's the plan as of this morning. That
great.
they have got permission from the Italian Minister of Culture that they can hold their MMA fight in the Colosseum. Who wins?
Zuckerberg, easily.
Even though Elon's way bigger.
Well, I mean,
yeah, he's also way older.
Yeah, and way fatter. I mean, I think if it goes, I think if it goes under 3 minutes, it will be a clear victory for Elon. I think anything past 3 minutes, you got to give it to the person. It doesn't even matter about the weight. You got to give it to the conditioning and the fighting experience.
Well, yeah, he has MMA experience. He's been training jiu-jitsu and stuff.
Mhm.
Also, the other question, what is the chance that it's actually just the AI versus the lizard people for ultimate control of the earth? Since AI and aliens are now both here, I think that maybe the Roman Colosseum will lift out of the earth and they will battle for supremacy. Percentage likelihood.
I think that's a good idea for your next book. You should
Okay.
look around that.
So
I can't wait to see it.
0% chance that's what's going on.
I wrote half a book when I was 19 years old about competitive air hockey and air hockey hustlers that were then selected as representatives of Earth for intergalactic combat in order to decide the fate of Earth. And it involved an air hockey tournament and like a hustler who was trying to reform himself, battling space aliens in air hockey. I only wrote half of it though, and I didn't draw any of it.
That sounds we're gonna have to write it. Miel, I feel like you'd be more appropriate for drawing both of these than either Sean or I. You're much better at the fantastical sci-fi.
We need to clone you.
Yeah. As Sean takes his shirt off and shows us his nipples.
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. It's really sweaty. I mean, these shirts are quality. Don't get me wrong. You should definitely buy them because they're definitely going to be on sale fairly soon. I got a couple extras, but it's a little sweaty. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to reveal myself. Are you asking?
What?
You think I should throw my hat in the ring too? I'll mop up whoever's left after their fight. Is that what you're suggesting?
If it is indeed the intergalactic battle for the Greys / AIs versus the lizard people who want to go back to Mars, which it would be Elon, then we need someone to come in. I don't know. Maybe we should let the AI take over. Like, what we're gonna have like DeSantis versus Newsom for president or some bullshit like that. Like, maybe let us have the AI take over, or Sean, you can go. Yes, be the third and get humanity, Earth back.
If I had to fight one of them, I would prefer to fight Elon, as long as it was a large enough space that I could run circles around him.
That's a good question. Miel, who would you take?
Elon seems more ruthless. I think if I lost to both of them, Elon is the one who would keep pounding on me while I was unconscious. And I don't like the idea of that. But I wouldn't lose to him, I think.
Yeah, if I had to fight him in an elevator, I would rather fight Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
If I got to fight him in anything that's bigger than an elevator, I would think Elon would be easier to beat.
Yeah,
I'm sticking with it.
I agree that.
Is he tall, Elon? Is he
he's
tall,
like
man?
6'2"?
Oh,
yeah,
no.
so,
and Zuckerberg's like 5'5", 5'6". There's a big weight and size differential.
Okay.
I mean, I'm heavier than Zuckerberg and taller than both of them, so I'm not worried about that aspect of it. But I just think that like he's got so much mass that if you got into the bear hug, and then he doesn't have to give. This is like a Tank Abbott situation for those of you guys who are also 43, like 40, however old I am, and watched only the first 15 UFCs. This is a Tank Abbott situation, right? Tank Abbott's going to beat the shit out of you as long as he can hit you. But if you can run around him, and he, gasses himself out in 2 minutes, then you're okay,
Yeah. Or Emmanuel Yarborough, the sumo guy that they had, like the 150-pound Japanese guy beat him with an armbar, something like that. Yeah, that could be what it's going to be. Well, I know, Sean, you got to run. And Miel, thanks so much for bringing this to us. It was really a joy to have a reason to go back and pull this off the shelf and look at it again.
Well, yeah, and thanks for talking to us. I mean, I hope that we can do it again sometime. It was great to get your insight, and I apologize to talking if we talk too much here. And
no, I like it that way. I prefer this before being interviewed. This was great.
Yeah.
Tell me about your childhood, Miel.
Did your mom beat you with flowers? Why do you draw sexualized flowers? Yeah.
Well, that's a question for another time.
We'll leave it hanging.
We'll talk about this next time.
Yeah, that'll be on your next book. All right, guys, really appreciate it. Take it easy.
Take care, guys.
Make sure to like, smash that subscribe button, and ring that bell.